Good afternoon to you. I'm Danilo Evangelista, and welcome to our tropical weather outlook for Sunday, August 24th, 2025. On today's tropical weather outlook, we have Fernand, which has formed another named storm for the 2025 hurricane season. And we have an invest that we're still tracking in the Caribbean, and it's a stubborn one, Invest 99L. And there's quite a bit of interesting things to go over with that. And it's probably going to be a long week of tracking related to that. And of course, we have Fernand to go over. So let's start off with the National Hurricane Center homepage. Starting off really quickly with Fernand. Tropical storm right now, maximum sustained winds at 40 miles per hour, minimum central pressure at 1,010 millibars. So this is a weak storm, but this will probably begin to strengthen in a little bit. And then we have Invest 99L. And this is one stubborn invest, I should say. Had pretty much an off and on moderate chance of developing since it moved off the coast of Africa. It's looked like a pretty aggressive wave, almost tricked people into thinking that it was going to develop into a tropical system multiple times throughout the last several days, yet we are still talking about it as an invest. And it's looking very likely that this is now going to enter the Caribbean, and we're probably going to have to watch to see what it does in the Caribbean as it does enter because as I've mentioned before, conditions are very, very favorable, especially the further west you go. Sea surface temperature anomalies throughout the entire Caribbean and into the Gulf are very, very warm, as much as a degree Celsius, if not more. And as we saw with Aaron, the environment further west is just explosive. We have so much jet fuel in the ocean and in the atmosphere, and some subtle hints at model signals as well, showing that if this is able to successfully make it into the Caribbean, this might be something that we really need to watch very closely over the next week. But I'll go over all of those things in a little bit, but let's really quickly go over Fernand. Of course, right now, a weak tropical storm, and here's the satellite imagery of it. Definitely more organized than it was yesterday. Is producing some nice deep convection. In fact, it has that very classic shrimp look to it on satellite today, so probably a developing inner core. And this is probably going to strengthen decently over the next few days. The National Hurricane Center, I think, has a peak of 60 miles per hour with this. And yesterday they actually had this getting up to 70 miles per hour, so close to hurricane intensity. And that's still possible, maybe, if this is able to consolidate and strengthen further over the next several hours. But obviously, this is going to have a little bit amount of time. This is going to have through tomorrow, and then into Tuesday, before it eventually dies out Tuesday night into Wednesday, and it'll probably turn post-tropical by then. But the good news is that this is well east of Bermuda. Several days ago, we were talking about this invest when Fernand was still an invest, that maybe it might get close to Bermuda, but nope. Going to stay far east away from Bermuda, so this is going to be entirely a fish storm, and obviously not a very consequential storm at that. So really not much else to go over with Fernand, other than it's probably obviously giving us another name for the 2025 hurricane season, and intensity guidance as well. Just to hammer the point, probably not going to be a consequential storm. Most of the intensity guidance, there is some strengthening that occurs, but most of it is not very strong at all. All of it keeps it at a minimum tropical storm, maybe a moderate tropical storm, and I still wouldn't be surprised if this gets a little stronger than that and we see a stronger and tropical storm with Fernand if it's able to keep its act together. And not get overcome by dry air or wind shear like it has struggled to do so a little bit before forming over the last several days. So we'll see what happens, but at least in terms of intensity-wise and definitely in terms of impact-wise, do not expect much from Fernand. Would not worry about this. The one thing though that really is piquing my interest in, honestly, quite a lot of people, is Invest 99L. Because this has been one stubborn wave. It's just as immediately it came off the coast of Africa, already looked like it was a very solid wave. In fact, within a few days of coming off the coast of Africa, tried to form, and pretty much for the last several days, It's been kind of fooling us. It's almost as if it's an optical illusion, in showing that this has been, at least for the last several days, on the verge of trying to develop and become a tropical system, but still has not done so yet. But at least as of today, this storm is still producing convection, especially in the latest recent frames here. Quite the aggressive convective burst that we're starting to see here with 99L. And this is now approaching the island. So if you are in the southern Lesser Antilles, especially here, I think this is Barbados, get ready for quite the punch when it comes to gusty winds and heavy rain as we head into tonight and into tomorrow as this moves westward into the Caribbean. But in terms of development aspects, we'll still have to see, because I will tell you that vorticity-wise, this has a pretty good vorticity signature, and there definitely is some sort of low-level circulation associated with it. The main debate over the last week has pretty much been whether or not this actually has a defined low-level center enough for it to be a tropical system. But I don't know, it's just every so often you get these satellite pictures, especially from microwave, and I posted the microwave shot yesterday from 99L, and it almost always looks like it's trying to develop, but it obviously does not do so. But I mean, there's something to 99L. And obviously the National Hurricane Center thinks that because we actually have a recon inside 99L right now. And actually, I just loaded to the latest frame. They're going for a center pass right now, and they're trying to see if there's actually a low-level circulation associated with this. And we're actually going to have a few recon flights into 99L over the next several days. Let me actually really quickly bring it up here, if I can find it. So Invest 99L, we're going to have a recon. Obviously, we have one right now, 18Z. And there's also another one here at 16. I think that was earlier. There's also another one here for tomorrow morning, early tomorrow morning. So this is 5Z. So that's roughly overnight tonight into early tomorrow. And then we're also going to have a few more throughout the day tomorrow as well. So quite the abundance of recon we're going to have here with 99L, and we're going to see, we're going to monitor this. Is this indeed going to try to develop and consolidate at all? And the model intensity guidance, now this is the interesting part, because it's kind of been trying to develop over the last several days, but none of the models have really actually latched onto it. It's almost kind of been some aggressive, stubborn wave. And most of the intensity guidance still does not really indicate that there will be much development with 99L, except for a few of these intensity guidances here, especially the ships, seem to indicate that down the road, especially as this progresses further west into the Caribbean, eventually this might actually try and develop. And I've been saying that before, and I've said it many times before, you cannot completely take your eyes off of these waves, especially these stubborn waves like 99L has been. You cannot take your eyes off of it, especially because we're in the peak of the season, and really anything that will try to develop usually does. And just look at the last several years. We've had so many instances in the past where we've had storms that have not developed till further west, and really once they got into the Caribbean and Gulf, things just set off for them, and they exploded and blossomed. And once again, we just saw that with Aaron. And I want to take your attention once again to the sea surface temperature anomalies throughout the Caribbean. Very, very warm, literally throughout the entire Caribbean, at least a degree Celsius above normal, and it gets even warmer than that in the Gulf of Mexico. So there's a lot of jet fuel in the ocean. And wind shear wise too, it's not all that bad in the Caribbean, especially as 99L will progress into the Eastern Caribbean. There is a much lower wind shear, much lower than it is now, because it's actually dealing with higher wind shear right now. And that's also what's made this so baffling, is the fact that even in the face of higher wind shear, roughly around 20 knots, 99L has still been able to produce quite a bit of convection. And again, at times, almost look like as if it's on the verge of developing into a tropical system. And as you see here in the Caribbean, things get more favorable. I mean, there's a little bit of higher wind shear here in the central Caribbean, but in the eastern Caribbean and in the western Caribbean, the wind shear is low, and it's probably going to get lower over the next several days. And something to note as well, look at the moisture. Definitely not like the eastern and central Atlantic right now, where we still have a lot of dry air. And the MDR right now still more susceptible to Saharan air. Look at how much more moisture we have throughout the Caribbean here, especially as you head further west, and especially there's a lot of moisture right now in the Gulf, partially because of this front though that's coming off the East Coast and obviously is bringing very, very nice and pleasant conditions to pretty much the entire eastern half of the United States, and very below normal temperatures, especially for August. But there's a lot of moisture in the Caribbean and a lot of moisture in the Gulf, and lower wind shear, warmer sea surface temperature anomalies. We've seen this story before, and not saying that this is not gonna that this will blow up and become some sort of intense storm as this gets further west. But we saw what happened with Aaron. In fact, you could actually see the cold wake here that Aaron has left behind, and it's just again it just goes to show how much intensity Aaron produced, and it really happened in a very short period of time here. Again, in just a span of 24 hours, Aaron, as soon as it got to the Western Atlantic, it blossomed from a tropical storm to a Category 5 hurricane, and quite an intense one at that. And then obviously it remained a pretty intense storm, and grew very large in size, also in part because of the very warm sea surface temperature anomalies we had here off the East Coast. And I think that's just a sign. I think that, and again, as I said this before, Aaron is just the beginning. And I think as well, it is a sign of what is to come here and how favorable things are, especially throughout the Western Atlantic. And even looking back here into the MDR, things are still very, very warm. And it's only August 23rd. We have a long way to go throughout the rest of this peak season. And we'll see what happens. And finally, just want to show you the European ensembles. I guess a little bit aggressive, a little bit less aggressive today than yesterday, because some of the European ensembles yesterday actually took 99L into the northwestern Caribbean. And it wasn't a lot of ensembles, but there were a few of them that brought this into the northwestern Caribbean and blew it up into a pretty intense storm entering the Gulf. And the European ensembles, as of today, seemingly not doing much. But we'll have to see, honestly, because it's the peak of the season. And as I said before, you really can't trust anything, especially with these sneaky waves that are very stubborn. And in fact, you kind of still see here one ensemble member that tries to make this stronger as it progresses further west into the Caribbean. And then eventually there is also this other ensemble here, maybe associated with some of the energy from 99L. So we'll have to see how things go, especially the further west it goes. And I also wouldn't put much stock into the models too, because as I've said, this has really been a defiant and stubborn wave. And really not a lot of the models have been good at all in catching on to how much of a stubborn and intense wave, and really a wave that's been unwilling to die. None of the models have caught on to that, and it's likely that a lot of the models still are not catching on to what might happen if this continues to remain stubborn, especially into the Caribbean. And as I showed you, sea surface temperature wise, atmospheric conditions wise, now this will have to go through a little bit of struggle in the Eastern Caribbean because low-level easterlies, a low-level jet tends to be especially strong in the Eastern Caribbean. There's just something about the Eastern Caribbean that tends to be a graveyard. So this will have to contend with that, but we'll see. We're going to watch 99L very closely over the next week. Again, it's the peak of the hurricane season. Literally anything can happen. But really quickly, before I end today, I want to bring to you 33 years ago today, Hurricane Andrew. If you remember that storm, I was certainly not old enough for that. But Hurricane Andrew, a very memorable storm, 33 years ago today, in 1992, Andrew made landfall in southern Florida as a powerful Category 5 hurricane. And this is from Michael Ferragamo, and he tweeted the last radar image of Hurricane Andrew as it was making landfall in South Florida, before the radar got blown off the roof. And he also said that a private residence would soon record a wind gust of 177 miles per hour. And Hurricane Andrew was one beast that absolutely plowed into southern Florida. And in many ways, people really credit Andrew as being the start of the very, prominent hurricane tracking community that we have online. Because a lot of people credit Andrew for being the start of the interest of wanting to track hurricanes. Why wouldn't it be? It was an incredible storm. But Hurricane Andrew, quite 33 years later, and all I will say about Andrew is, especially for southern Florida, Andrew really has been the last time southeastern Florida has seen a very, very intense storm making landfall head on, especially near the Miami area. And not alluding to anything about this year, but there's always a time for everything. And the fact that it's already been 30 years since Andrew, one might think that when will eventually be the next time that southeastern Florida is going to get hit head on. Eventually, these droughts come to an end, and we'll see what happens. Maybe it's this year, maybe it's next year, but especially about this year, we have a lot to go left of this peak. And again, all I'm going to say is things are just getting started, and we're going to have to watch the tropics very closely over the next several weeks. That's going to do it for today's video, though, so hope you enjoyed. If you did, leave a like, comment, and subscribe. All the good things, as I always say every single video. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Stay safe. Peace, love, and kindness to you all. And of course, I'll be back with more tomorrow.